G'day, Cam here. Let's start with the line I hear all the bloody time after an incident. He's a good bloke, just made a terrible call. Or, she's solid, experienced, never had an issue before, just one bad decision. And look, sometimes that's said with genuine care. Sometimes it's said because people are rattled. And sometimes, let's be honest, it's said because it wraps the whole thing up in a nice little bow, so nobody has to ask any uncomfortable questions. Picture it. Workshop, site, warehouse, road. Take your pick. Someone bypasses a step, works in the line of fire, drives a bit too quick for the conditions, starts a task without the proper check, or reckons this'll only take a sec, then bang. Near miss, injury, damage, or worse. Straight away the story forms. Not like him, not like her. They knew better. And my personal favourite, they just weren't thinking. Righto. Human beings, under pressure, in a system, at work. And that's the best we've got? The good person story is comforting because it preserves our worldview. Good people are safe. Competent people don't get hurt. Experienced workers don't make bad calls. So if something goes wrong, it must be a weird one-off, a lapse, a brain fade, a moment of stupidity. End of story, put the kettle on. Problem is that framing is usually incomplete. Not always false, incomplete. Intent and outcome are not the same thing. A worker can be trying to get the job done, help the team, keep production moving, avoid delay, follow what they think is normal, and still end up making a call that puts them or someone else in a hole. That doesn't mean the outcome was acceptable. It means the path to that outcome needs proper scrutiny. This is where investigations go crook. The minute we confuse character with causation, learning stops. We start diagnosing the person instead of understanding the event. We label it human error, like we've solved bloody gravity. But saying a person made an error tells you almost nothing useful about prevention. It just names the last visible thing before the incident. And if you're leading people, that matters. Because if your only conclusion is good worker, bad choice, your fixes will be rubbish. Retrain them, remind them, tell everyone to be careful. Maybe whack a poster on the wall for good measure. Job done. Until the same setup produces the same sort of call from the next good person. So here's the shift. Stop asking, was this a good person? That's not the investigation question. Ask, what made that call make sense at the time? Different question, much better answers. Because people rarely wake up and say, today I'd like to create a high potential event for the paperwork pile. They act in context, under conditions, around equipment, within procedures, inside organizational expectations. And if we don't look at that properly, we'll keep treating symptoms and calling it safety. So why do bad calls look reasonable in the moment? Because the moment is crowded. Pressure, habit, time, incomplete procedures, mixed messages, dodgy workarounds that have become normal. Maybe the task's routine. Maybe it's changed halfway through. Maybe the right gear isn't there. Maybe the supervisor's tied up. Maybe the team's trying to keep the wheels on. That's how decisions are shaped, before anyone ever gets to the famous last step. This is why I bang on about not lumping everything into human error. It matters what kind of error we're talking about. A slip is attention going off sideways, doing the wrong action in a familiar task. A lapse is memory letting you down. You forgot a step, lost your place, omitted something. A mistake is different again. The person thought the plan was right, but it wasn't. That can be rule-based, using the wrong familiar rule, or knowledge-based, where they're in unfamiliar territory and think their way to the wrong answer. Then you've got violations. That's intentional departure from the rule. But even there, not all violations are the same beast. Routine violations are the ones everyone sort of knows about and tolerates. Situational violations happen when the job, time, tools, or conditions make compliance difficult. Personal optimizing is convenience, shortcut because it suits me. Organizational optimizing is uglier. Production, service, or commercial goals quietly overruling safety. Exceptional violations can turn up in unusual circumstances. Reckless is the real cowboy stuff. No care, no thought for consequences. Now, before anyone gets excited, identifying a violation does not mean the case is closed. Sometimes a violation is actually a flare in the sky, telling you the system is impractical. If everyone keeps stepping around a rule, you may not just have a people problem. You may have a rule that doesn't match reality. Poor planning, lousy supervision, incompatible goals, or a culture that quietly rewards cutting corners with comfort, convenience, or time saved. This is where the PEPO lens is gold. People, environment, equipment, procedures, organisation. Use it properly and it stops you getting mesmerised by the last person who touched the job. People, training, competence, fatigue, communication, supervision, workload. Environment, light, noise, weather, access, congestion, visibility, surface conditions. Equipment, design, condition, maintenance, modifications, labels, suitability. Procedures, were they available, current, usable, understood, actually followed? And organisation, the big one. Planning, resourcing, contractor management, communication, risk management, learning, culture, management of change. That's the point, really. A call can look ordinary from inside the work and outrageous from outside the paperwork. If you want to know why it happened, you need to reconstruct the world as the person encountered it, not the world as the policy manual wished it to be. Terrible analogy, but it's a bit like judging a bloke's driving by the skid mark without noticing the rain, bald tyres, blind bend, broken speedo, and the boss ringing him every 5 minutes. The skid mark matters. It's just not the whole story. So how do you investigate this properly? Start simple. Ask why. Then ask why again. 5 whys is useful for lower level stuff when it's done with discipline and actual evidence. Not as a guessing game. Not as a race to the first management-friendly answer. And not as one skinny causal chain when the event clearly had multiple branches. Sometimes you hit a control point in the organisation. Sometimes you find you need more data. Sometimes you reach a point beyond organisational control. Fine, but you keep moving past the surface. For more significant stuff, you need the bigger frame. That's where ICAM comes in. Not as a fancy chart to impress the board, but as a way of sorting findings into something useful. Absent or failed defences, individual or team actions, task or environmental conditions, and organisational factors. That order matters. You're not just asking who did what. You're asking what defences were missing or failed to detect, warn, control, protect, contain, or support recovery. If a procedure existed but was useless, that's a failed defence. If no proper risk assessment was done, absent defence. If the communication process relied on one person remembering to pass on road conditions, failed defence. If there was no practical separation between plant and people, absent defence. These are the bits that should have stopped the bad day becoming a worse one. Then you look at organisational factors, the latent stuff sitting there long before the event. Training gaps, poor contractor management, weak risk management, inadequate maintenance management, bad design, ineffective management of change, organisational learning that exists only in PowerPoint, culture that tolerates drift, procedures that are technically present and practically useless. That's where repeated events are born. And for leaders, here's the practical advice. First, fix the setup. Don't just tell people to be more careful in a system that keeps setting them up to trade safety for time, convenience, or production. Second, coach fairly. Separate learning from accountability. Honest mistakes, routine drift, and reckless behaviour are not identical, so stop treating them like they are. Third, learn properly. Gather facts early. Plan the investigation. Use PEPO. Build a clean timeline. Interview witnesses well, without leading them into your favourite theory. Validate evidence. Then make recommendations that actually change conditions and strengthen defences, not just add another admin layer to the pile. And one more thing. Recommendations should be aimed at the design of the game, not just the player. If all your actions sit at retrain, remind, review, you probably haven't gone deep enough. Sometimes admin controls are necessary, sure, but don't kid yourself, they're the gold standard. Better controls beat better slogans every day of the week. Good people can still make bad calls. That's not an excuse, it's a clue. If we're brave enough to follow it, we might actually learn something useful. And that, funnily enough, is the whole point. Catch you next time in Cam's Corner.